Tonight, really, the agenda for our special meeting is to go through our EDC input for TPZ. I had sent around my own sort of edits, add, change, delete to the 2015 POCD, and kind of had conversations with Scott and a few other folks over the course of the last week.
Sorry to interrupt. Can you turn your mic on?
Yeah.
Thanks, Simon.
That helps. You missed all of that. Okay. It's December 12th. So what we thought, and Scott took a stab at this, and I think it's a great start, but really put a little more context around a vision versus just going in and redlining the old document, right? Which I think really makes sense since we update it every 10 years, right? We may want to take a fresh look at it. So I don't know, do you want to sort of lead the discussion, or do you want to just open it up for reactions?
Well, I'm happy to sort of.
You authored this?
Yeah, and or maybe just read through the vision because it's so short.
Good.
But I'm thinking maybe a little bit of explanation. What I was thinking is that we've had a POCD for multiple decades now, 20 years, that has suggested the same thing, and it hasn't gotten done. And so I was saying, well, what's our vision? Let's tell TPZ, I don't know that we can get it done, but it's TPZ that has to come up with a POCD. And so what would be, we're telling them that we need to do, given the fact that we've been trying to do these changes, but they've just never been made. And so I thought maybe stepping back and giving a vision for them to work with to say, now incorporate that in and get it done.
Right.
Figure out how to get it done. So, I mean, I think people haven't it's really rudimentary, but I thought it would be worthwhile reading it because if people are watching the meeting tonight, just to know what we're thinking, because a lot of people don't see what we're talking about. We hand it out, but then they never see it. So, I lifted this from a POCD. We can tailor it to our own needs. But one would appear to be a town that was looking for a sustainable introduction to their vision on EDC, said the planning choices and investments we make today are key to creating and sustaining the village centers of tomorrow. To support the vision of vibrant villages, the town must address the limitations imposed on commercial development by outdating zoning regulations. Sustaining businesses and incentivizing the establishment of new commercial enterprises is essential to village vibrancy.
Which I thought was very relevant to our mission.
Sufficient infrastructure exists to support dense mixed-use villages. Additional investments in infrastructure will yield dividends, encouraging people to live, work, and spend time in our villages rather than speeding through them, seeking other destinations. The public is generally unaware of the underlying regulatory impediments to realizing vibrant villages. Big picture opportunities and efficiencies are obscured by a land use process that is by statutory design principally focused on single lots. A more comprehensive approach to zoning and development is required to unlock the potential of our infrastructure and creating thriving communities. So then, we go into and we say to TPZ, here's our vision recommendation to you. That's sort of a background. We can tailor that as sort of our million feet view. But create vibrant villages for a sustainable and thriving Woodbridge. For decades, Woodbridge has recognized the potential of mixed use, vibrant communities to drive economic growth and enrich the town's character. Despite this vision being included in past plans, it has never been realized. The 2025 Plan of Conservation and Development offers a critical opportunity to break this cycle and take actionable steps toward considering multiple vibrant villages, neighborhoods, and communities across the town. The failure to enact zoning changes for mixed-use development, coupled with community opposition to residential growth in business districts, underscores the need for a new strategy. Relying on a single area like the Village District has limited the town's growth and left it vulnerable to stagnation. A more diversified approach with vibrant villages in key locations is essential for a thriving and sustainable future. Then my suggestion was to go into our goals, and Scott can tell you how we've aligned those with the Board of Selectmen. They're not really our goals, they're actually the Board of Selectmen's goals, so that town leadership sets the goals, we follow those goals, and if you don't like them, then you got to take that up with the Board of Selectmen. And we finished by saying the new vision for Woodbridge, the 2025 POCD must move beyond planning for mixed-use development without action. It is time for Woodbridge to commit to creating vibrant villages that embody the principles of economic growth, inclusivity, and sustainability. By embracing this vision and implementing zoning changes, the TPZ can lay the foundation for a thriving future. The idea is to tell TPZ, we've had enough, and let's get it done, and let's not put all our eggs in one basket, but for we sort of get held hostage to stagnation. You know, if we, so that was,
So the
Yeah.
goals are.
that's a draft. That's a draft for discussion.
The goals are a direct lift from the Board of Selectmen.
95% direct lift from
Okay.
the Board of Selectmen.
What's the other 5%?
I can't remember, but I not embellished. I gave an extra sentence to a couple of them
Okay.
that were lifted because Board of Selectmen is in the process. They've got like they're on their 7th draft, but they included a section now for EDC and housing attainment. So I took not the housing attainment goals, but I took the EDC
Right.
goals and lifted them and put them in as the goals in this thing. So we frame it with, my thought is we frame it with a vision to tell TPZ what our vision is. This is for discussion, obviously. We frame it with a vision. We say, here's the selectmen's goals. Do we like them? Do we agree? And if we like the selectmen's goals, then there it is. Have at it, TPZ. We're out of here in a half an hour and SLR does their work, you know? That's
I
my
have a
thought.
question. Where are these other villages? Because I know of only one village by name, and that's the Flats, which has been called various things, including the Village District, Woodbridge Village, and the Flats. Where are the other villages that are referenced in all of this
So,
document?
Chris, I'll just jump in on that. When I
Yep.
read through it, I actually thought this was a great piece of this, given that we're looking at a 10-year
Yep.
look, right? And knowing that the intention is for this to go and secure grants, right, from the state later on, I felt that putting a plural at the end of that, okay, gave us a little breathing room. As we're beginning the process with the country club.
Okay.
Okay, so that could give us some room there, should that get,
So the intent is to include the country club as one village and the
Potentially.
Flats as another village.
yeah.
Well, maybe. I mean, I think, you know, if you will, when we get to the goals, and I'll explain just what my, for discussion was, because I think you were aiming the question at me a little bit, and you were
No,
diffusing
I'm
a
aiming
little
the
bit.
question at the document,
But, yeah.
because it's in the
But-
document.
but-
That's what the
but-
question comes from.
I think, you know, when we say village, I think we also can interject village, community, neighborhood. And we need vibrant neighborhoods. We need vibrant communities. You know, a lot of these large lot single things are not vibrant. They're quiet. The old POCD said, we're a quiet town. We want small. We want quiet. Well, that's the single family large lots. You know, that's not a vibrant community or neighborhood, really. I mean, I can't get trick or treating going in, you know, our neighborhoods. It's hard. So what I'm saying, you know, it's not, and so I'm thinking, and if you get held hostage to inaction in one area where we haven't had it move forward yet.
So you're
then-
saying in the one
then-
area being the Flats.
Right, if it had
Okay.
moved forward there and we had
Okay.
seen the results of that.
We haven't seen any growth in the Flats in the last 10 years.
20? We
The
haven't
last
changed
10
our
years.
zoning. We haven't had
We've
any
dramatically changed our zoning in the last 20 years in the Flats,
How-
especially
how-
the last 10 years.
How so?
We've added the project on Bradley Road, which is Toll, which was Woodbridge Village,
But-
which was an overlay zone. So that's changed.
That's, yeah, but we
dramatically.
haven't added mixed use unless it's 55
We've
active.
added mixed use on the west side of Amity Road. The zone has changed for the properties on the west side of Amity Road to be mixed use. So we have done some changes there. We've seen some changes to the infrastructure. It's not as fast as I would like, but we're also in the process of making changes right now to the infrastructure in the Flats. So to say that we're stagnant, we haven't done anything is really not correct. We have done quite a bit. And if you look at the last 60, 70 years, there's quite a bit more has been done in the last 10 years than in the previous probably 40. Now, I was looking at, you sent out the Yale study about the Flats from 2013, I think it was. or
I forwarded
14.
that to Cooper Roberts.
Yes,
So they-
which
they
was,
had requested to have
I'm
a little back-
skimming through that, and I'm looking at Bradley Road going,
Yeah.
there's no Urbano building. So that's new. I mean, think about what has changed in the Flats. That's another new piece that's new. And then we've got Toll Brothers, which is new. We've got for the start of sidewalks, which are new. Okay, we didn't have sidewalks forever down there. Now we have sidewalks encompassing Lucy, Bradley, Litchfield, Amity. okay, which is nice. The 2030 committee is we're putting in place new infrastructure. It's in the works, the design's in the works. We're gonna have town meetings in the spring to talk about the process going forward. There'll be a shovel in the ground in less than a year
Right.
to change this infrastructure. So to say that we're stagnant, we haven't done anything is really not correct. We're doing a lot, but it's not maybe as much as some people think we should do. But we are doing a lot, in my opinion, down there.
So what are you saying, it's like the language in here is a little too harsh?
Well, I just think that, and I just breezed this, but when you say we're stagnant, we're not stagnant, we're doing something, okay? You could pick a property and say that property is stagnant because nothing's happened to it for a decade, but you can't say the area is stagnant because it's not. It's been changing, it's been evolving, it's been growing. You know, Toll Brothers is a great example. This is a huge game changer for our town.
Oh, right.
So, I mean, that's a great example. That took so long to get done. I mean, these things take a long time to come to fruition. And so,
If I could tell you, I watched back when the POCD was passed last time in 2015, and I've spent the last few months watching those, and I've watched all the public comments in opposition, including from the first selectmen's offices and so forth. And you had some folks down there, you mentioned, in that area that saw it a little bit differently than you, Chris. And some of them saw it that, for instance, if we lifted the age restriction on 55, there was an application immediately after the POCD to start to enact those kinds of things that were in the POCD from 2015. And so when we tried to lift the 55 restrictions, we got toll, but we have a very non-vibrant, it's a need, and there's all housing is good housing, and all economic development is good economic development, but it's not as vibrant as we could have made it. If we had gone, for instance, what was proposed was to take off the 55 restriction, we, instead of having $1 million of net tax revenue with really not much offset, right, because you wouldn't have the increased costs of other things, we could have maybe had, instead of 70 units, we could have had 138 units. And instead of that 138 units, we could have had $1.5 million in revenue and $500,000 in cost. But we would have had 138 people buying stuff rather than 70 people older buying stuff. So that's economic development that I see. So those are the kinds of changes that some supported down there, but it never got through. And if that's not what we want to see, if we want to see that very slower, and I'm not suggesting you have to force something on somebody, because that was the mistake of 2015, I think. Because there was consultants, there was economic development plans. I'm not suggesting, but give alternatives so that alternative doesn't hold hostage other alternatives. Because if you limit to one basket and you put everything on your business model here, then you've really, if that doesn't come through, and I don't think we have a lot of vacancy down there, we have a lot of things going on, that if it doesn't come through, then what we're putting them all in one basket, and this, the ability to put it in, deliver on that vibrant community, then you can hold off and you can go slower on the additional vibrant communities. For when I'm long dead, 30 years from now, 40 years from now, we have to pick up another vibrant community. 40 years from now, but we did it here and we showed it can work, but we're held hostage.
When the initial proposal for the Parati property came, I'm going to say 2005 or 6, for 146 units and 10,000 square feet of retail and commercial space. There was a lot of reluctance and resistance because of the number of units.
Where was that supposed to take place?
Exactly where Toll Brothers is.
Okay.
Exactly that same spot. So those same two parcels of land were
130 some units.
It was 146 plus 10,000 square feet of commercial and restaurant space. So when that was over 55, the neighbors they felt comfortable that because many of the people living there would be not traveling to work at the same time, would be retired or semi-retired, the traffic situation wouldn't exacerbate the already horrible traffic situation down there from 2005, 6, 7 era. So when that was approved in 2009, Unfortunately, the housing market crashed, so it didn't get built. But if you take away, if you have 130 or 140 units of market rate housing with 140 families of people that need to get to work every morning in that neighborhood without dramatically widening your infrastructure, it's going to be a disaster, okay? It's already really challenging. I walk every morning down there. It's at least once or twice a week I see someone blow past a bus with the red lights on because they're tired of waiting in the traffic, okay? So if we want to add 140 more people who are working down there and living down there and having to drive to work, we're not designed for that. We don't have the infrastructure for that.
Then we may be saying the same thing.
So we would either need to improve the infrastructure first and then build the housing, or say we're not going to be able to build as much housing as
Right.
would be ideal because we don't have the infrastructure for it. We have to live within our realm. Our realm is this area. What do we have? We have limited water and sewer across the whole town. We need to accept that, or we need to expand it. Okay, we have a limited space at our elementary school. We either need to accept it or expand it. And the expansion comes with costs. So we need to consider all these things. As we talk about other villages, if we're going to add another village somewhere in the town, there's going to be associated costs with it. Okay, we have and I'm not saying we shouldn't. I'm just saying we need to recognize that and really look at the costs of this, because I've talked to many people about education. We've got a great school. Beecher School's a great school. It's almost at its max, and it's going to be at its max in the next 10 years. And we're using studies in this town which are done by people that are not looking at Beecher School specifically. They're looking at the state of Connecticut and saying, oh, educational enrollment's down, so you can add more housing with children. We can't do that in Woodbridge unless we build another school or another addition onto Beecher School, because it is virtually at its max. So we need to keep these things in mind as we're trying to plan, because it's a plan. It's not a hope and a dream. It's a plan. It's something that we could reasonably expect to accomplish in a certain amount of time. Okay.
But we had,
Just one question.
in 2005 and in 2015, we had the exact same recommendation to create a mixed-use zones. And for 20 years, it didn't get done. And that's what I'm trying to grapple with. And I'm not here to suggest what areas, what neighborhoods, what backyards of somebody.
Okay.
It could be my backyard, your backyard, I don't really care. But what I'm saying is, if we limit ourselves to an area that we haven't gotten it done, we could have Dev 2. Traffic problem again, I hear you, maybe that's not right. Flats, maybe not the right area for that kind of growth because of its challenges. The ridge, connecting pedestrian traffic without vehicular traffic, that ridge is right above there. It's a non-protected ridge that goes all the way from the JCC up the Amity Professional Buildings, all the way across. That's that ridge, right, that creates the flats in the bowl across from West Rock. There's other areas that could be potentially on the slate that have the desired infrastructure to create a vibrant community, and that's our economic development charge. If we say that we can't do it in the flats because there's traffic, and we can't do it because we got to, what I'm saying is, then we've got to think, where are those areas someday? Or figure out how to do it and see if that increases it, but that's my thought for the vision for this town.
I'm not saying we can't do it in the flats. I'm saying we need to do it recognizing that there are guide rails, there are limitations, just like there's limitations anywhere on doing anything, okay?
My question's connected.
Yes.
Chris, in your opinion, what has been the impediment to commercial investment in the flats?
That's a great question.
It is a great
There's a couple of aspects. One of it is we have some property owners down there that are
Private
really
investment.
driven to invest in their properties. We have others that are not very driven to invest in their properties. They're more passive landlords, and it's not as important to them. The bigger picture is we're not drawing people to come down to that area and shop. We're not drawing people from Upper Woodbridge down there. They use it as a cut through to New Haven, to the Parkway. And when the 2030 committee was tasked with our charge was to look at the town from a 1,000-foot view. Really give broad, aspirational ideas on how we can improve our grand list and how we can lower our taxes. But unfortunately or fortunately, COVID hit, and now we have the opportunity to apply for massive federal grants to improve the infrastructure in the flats, okay? Which I believe what we're going to do is going to attract people to come there, park, and walk to different places. And that's going to encourage business owners to invest in their properties and the current businesses to expand and thrive. But we need to get the infrastructure in before we can expect that investment. That's my thought.
Chris, are you guys working with the town planner that we're hiring?
Not really, because what we've done,
So Chatty, that's Justin going in yours.
We haven't
Just so
met
you know,
yet. Hi, how are you?
That's the town planner you just referred to. He's in the room.
Nice to meet you.
well, I mean, we would love to. I mean, we're right now, SLR is doing the first part of the design phase of the infrastructure plan. So in January or February, we're going to set up a community meeting and roll that out to the public, and hopefully we can get you involved in that. But we've been doing this all since before you were here. So we're kind of near the first end zone, but we can get a little help getting us through the next end zone. So our plan is to have 3 community meetings in the next probably 9 or 10 months. Well, the 9 or 10 months of 2025. 30%, 60%, 90% design, get input from the residents and from anybody that wants to give input on things we should tweak, and then hopefully get a shovel in the ground by the very end of the year of 2025.
Chris, is the traffic situation down in the flats also an impediment to commercial investment?
Yeah, I think it is. Yeah.
Where was the parking that this lots of grant's gonna create?
There's lots of different places that's
Where?
there's gonna be some parking on Amity Road. There'll be,
Parking on Amity?
yes, they're gonna narrow the width of Amity Road. The traffic's way too fast.
Uh-huh.
Cars drive way too fast on Amity Road because it's wide, and so if we narrow the road, we can actually put parking on the road.
Where would that be, on the Amity?
I don't have it in front of me, but I'm thinking probably Woodbridge Hardware in that area of Amity, maybe a little bit south and a little bit north. I'm not sure, I don't have the plan in front of me. I have to look at the plan.
So Chris, you want it to be more like a main street?
More like a main street instead of a racetrack.
Okay.
Yes.
So I'm sorry. The work that you guys are doing, at some point, is there going to be a conflict with what the town planner is doing?
That's a good question. I don't know what the town planner is doing, so I didn't see that first.
Well, one of the goals that you see on here is an actual economic development plan, right? And one of the challenges that we've talked about is 2030 is down the road,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
how are we going to work all of that in, right? So those are, I think, integrated into the goals here,
Yeah.
right? But one of the first steps in that process is going to be answering Steve's question. Okay, where are we right now? Okay, why are we where we are right now? If you drop a pin in the middle of the flats and you have a 3-mile radius, there's 130,000 people that live within 3 miles of the flats.
Yep.
Wow.
Okay, if you drop a pin in my store on the Post Road in Orange and draw a 3-mile circle, like that's like the gold standard of retail,
Yeah.
right? There's 70,000 people that live.
Mhm.
Okay.
Okay.
So it is not a matter of there aren't enough people, there aren't enough customers, there aren't enough workers. Depending on the industry, right?
Yep.
There's something else that is holding us back down there. Okay. And the same goes with the country club. Okay. There's 100,000 people making an average of almost $100,000 household income a year within 3 miles of that, right? So my own perspective is, I think we compete when you think about traditional, and this is my retail hat, right? We're not talking about healthcare or manufacturing either, right? But when you think about the fact that we have Hamden and Orange, and there's probably 3 of everything in each one of those towns, right? It makes it challenging. So I think the future is there are plenty of people. Our most successful businesses are destination businesses. Okay, Nepco, the running store,
The
right?
reason why we picked that spot.
Cats,
Yeah, we picked that
Uh,
spot
and-
because of the location,
Right.
because there's 1 million people within a 20-minute drive
Right.
of Woodbridge.
right,
So we picked Woodbridge. I mean, we could have gone to other places.
Right.
But we picked Woodbridge.
Right.
Because there's 1 million people within
Right.
a 20-minute driving radius.
Right.
And that's really, at the time, 25 years ago, people would drive 20 minutes to buy running shoes. Now there's more competition, but yes.
so it's, 15% of New Haven County lives within 3 miles.
Yeah.
All right, it's a pretty daunting number,
Yeah.
right? A
Yeah.
good number. But it
But the
begs
issue is
Steve's-
how do you get there? How do you
Well, it
get there?
begs Steve's
We're limited,
question.
we're limited,
Why-
we're limited by geography,
why-
we're
why-
limited
why
by
is
the
it
bowl.
vacant?
Yeah, yes,
Okay,
right.
why is it vacant?
We're limited by West Rock, or we're limited by,
There's the river, right?
Yep.
The flooding. There's. I'll be honest with you. I mistakenly went to Walgreens the other day because I didn't realize it was
yeah,
closed.
don't go to Walgreens.
I didn't like what I saw.
Okay,
All right. It was not looking pretty. What
Okay.
was going on Sunday afternoon in front of Walgreens, an abandoned retail center, right? And that. We can say, "Oh, that's
So-
not us." Right? It
Are
is.
you saying we have to partner and we have to look at this from a much more regional perspective? Scott?
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
That was for me.
Yeah, that was definitely for you, because if you're saying you go across the wall, right, it's got a few gate points, right? It's got underpasses and overpasses.
Right.
Go across the wall, and it didn't look, attractive in terms of business not functioning, it was empty shopping center and stuff.
Well, yeah, that's the nice way to put it.
Yeah, I still got my Subways there, some of them, but anyway.
Okay.
But are you thinking that we need to think more regionally? And let me just, before you answer, give you time to think. One of the things that excites me is that I think of the neurological center going in at St. Rafe's, right? We're all old enough to know St. Rafe's, right? And so the neurological center is a $900 million investment, okay? It's the largest neurological investment in the world. And it's gonna create an incredible amount of workforce need for housing down there. And that's probably 2.5 miles. And that is a huge need. How do we capture that? How do we partner with Yale? Shouldn't we be really having those connections? Because workforce housing with them, if they can control their housing costs, for instance, Stanford built Palo Alto School because they needed zoning. We can't offer zoning necessarily, but we can offer workforce housing to our large people. So how do we integrate ourselves with New Haven? My segue is to how do we get into a regional context? But
Right.
I think that's one certain way of thinking about how we integrate that and attract the customers that we need. And we've got to think broader than our own wall that go under the unpremise.
Right. So like I said, my own view is I don't think that this is a customer problem. Okay. I mean, I think that they're customers, right? And there are probably in 130,000 people, there are probably workers, right? Depending on the industry and what you're talking about. I think it's probably a number of things that we've talked about. It's the layout, right? It's the traffic, it's accessing it.
yeah.
I think it's the crime. Like, I don't want to go too heavy on that, but, I think that's real. I mean, I have, I'm in shopping plazas all over Connecticut, and if there are vacancies, I can tell you what it looks like. On the phone with landlords all the time. It's panhandling at every entrance, right? And this is from here to Putnam.
Okay.
Okay, like it's real. So I think you need to start with like, okay, why is it not working, and what do we need to do differently? Like, what is working? Okay, we have unique businesses that bring people from New York and New Jersey,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
For some of these businesses.
True.
So.
True.
I think, Scott, when you say, housing for St. Rafe's, right? That's what your point was, right? The development that's happening.
I'm just
down
saying,
there,
working
right?
with our regional.
Workforce
Well,
housing.
but thinking about us in a regional context,
Right.
more so than we think of ourselves as isolated. We're unique. I mean, we are part of, and maybe we've come to the point where we need to learn the lesson that we've never done. We have all these vacancies. Is that we need to join that regional environment and make it better. And low hanging fruit is to talk about down to St. Rafe's. But there's other areas that, you know, I could put my more social hat on.
Right.
To think about the reason we have panhandling is because we lack housing and those kinds of things. And, you know, those issues that we all need to work together to get at. We're a part of that, because if we're not a part of that, we end up looking like we are right now, and we can hand out our wayfinding signs and our welcome to Woodbridge signs, you know, but that's if we really want to grow it.
Right. So, I mean, we are gonna talk about workforce housing in
Yeah.
our next meeting as well,
Yeah.
right? I don't know. Steve, what are your thoughts based on what we have here?
I'm thinking more along the lines of what it is that we know. And we know that there's going to be lots of work that's gonna be done down in the Village District.
I
you know,
call it the flats, and I live there, and I like to call it the flats.
The flats. You know, so how do we build on that immediately?
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, Scott has laid out in here, I think, a pretty compelling argument about mixed-use zoning. You know, to me, it's something that I think would fit with what that intended design is down there. And so that's something that we should, I think, really bring out in this document and be, you know, real forward with it.
I agree 100%, but my frustration is looking at 2005 and 2015 and listening to some of the comments that wanted to see the mixed use happen, and these were business owners down in the flats. And when they made public comment, they said, you know, why are we just having mixed use for over 55s? Why are we restricting this so much? Why did we reject TPC's movement towards creating a mixed use thing, you know? And it became a real thing, like, you know, really bad stuff if you watch the hearings. So are we gonna go down that same path? I understand there are constrictions and so forth and views, and I'm not suggesting one area over another area, but I do think having competition can force people to make decisions that are, you know, you're not in one basket, you diversify for a vibrant communities. The community may look very different in one area. It may be a vibrant community that looks a little different than a vibrant flats. But it still is a vibrant community neighborhood. I would never do something in some area and just stick it there and plop it there without a plan to say it's a vibrant community, a vibrant neighborhood, or a vibrant village. Because if you do that, you know, like, so, you know, and then walk away from it. So I think there are other areas to do that, and I think it could get folks real on the village within its constraints to get it done correctly for all time and to get it done correctly. But you may find that mixed use is not as favored. What you may be thinking of mixed use may not be what is what the folks want, you know, the community down there wants.
Well,
and that's okay to my way of thinking, but where's our next vibrant community
Yeah.
or neighborhood
But
or village?
keep in mind, like I said, part of that community in the flats has already been, the zone's been changed to mixed use.
Where?
Part of it, on the west side of Amity Road. Okay, so we're talking
Well,
about
GBA.
where Subway is, where the bowling alley is. That side is mixed use. Yeah.
Anyway, we can bring Justin in on that, but that hasn't produced anything.
Well, not yet, because it's only been the last couple of years, and we went through COVID, and now we've gone through high
But
interest
GBA
rates. So you have to understand, these things don't happen in 5 minutes. This is a long process.
I wanna address
And
that.
I talk to people about, like, well, they want to get things done instantly. Nothing good happens instantly. It takes long, careful, thoughtful planning.
Chris, I want to really respond to that,
I'm ready.
because I think it's important for the whole town to hear it. If you make the impediment to say, I'm going to take you 20 years to get this done.
I didn't say that.
No, but take an example. Not you say that, but if you start off with a process, right? Well, you got to come in for a special exception. You got to come in with all these barriers that you lift. Then to say it takes so long to get it is a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you had things, and there was a fellow that made a public comment when we were going for mixed use. I say we, because I wasn't there, but and he was a leader in the community. And he made the public comment, and he says, if you change the zoning, and he was arguing not to change the zoning, but he said, if you change the zoning, it'll happen tomorrow. trust me, it'll happen tomorrow. But he says, I don't want you to change the zoning. I'm okay with that, but I'm letting you know the lesson. A leader in that area said, if you change the zoning, it'll happen tomorrow. He was advocating for not changing the zoning. So to say that it takes a long time as an excuse not to do the changes is a self-fulfilling prophecy. Just don't do it and let's move on.
Saying
I don't-
that.
I'm not
I'm not
hearing
saying that at all.
Yeah, okay.
I'm saying that we need to be realistic about what we can accomplish in a short period of time, okay? We've spent over 4 years on 2030, and we haven't put a shovel in the ground yet. But I feel like we've made good progress in working on this plan and engaging with the public and getting pushback and getting feedback, okay? The person who said, if we change the zone, it'll happen tomorrow, it's not gonna happen tomorrow. It's not gonna happen tomorrow. The reason why things haven't happened in the last 4 years, as I was saying, COVID and high interest rates and a challenging economy. If interest rates come down and the economy gets better, you will see more development. But it's not gonna happen if we
Yep.
don't have an environment, an economic environment, as well as a physical environment that's going to encourage both.
Short rebuttal. I'm just going to do a short rebuttal,
Yeah.
and then you can. Short rebuttal. You know, I think I agree with the person that said it'll happen a lot quicker than it would if you plan for it to take a long time, because if you look at the people that will do it, the profit motive and capitalism can come in and do that. And so if you said, I have zoning that's, I can give you an example from my career in investments, but if you, if you take down those impediments, they'll go to another town to build it. And if you take down those impediments, somebody will say, look, you mean I can do this by right? And I can do something? And I can get a permit to do it? There may be some things that you have to get building permits and all those kinds of things, but you can take down those barriers. The investment world will see that as that's where I should invest. If you leave the barriers up, then, so I totally agree with that person that said that. And so I'm not suggesting you want to open up the floodgates. You have to be careful because you have infrastructure concerns and traffic. I understand the area has its challenges. So I'm not minimizing those, but don't hold the future of the economic development of the town hostage for that area. If it's
Scott,
we're
we're
not-
saying the
yeah,
same thing.
We're not.
That's the same thing.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
I think
Okay.
we're saying the
Yeah.
plural at the end of villages.
Well, I don't know if Chris is interested in plural.
I mean,
Well-
this is your meeting. I'm just here to keep.
Well,
no.
and we
Input.
really, you know, with
Yeah.
2030, and the
Yeah.
idea was not to have separate submissions
Yeah,
to the TPZ, right? And if you look at the 2015 POCD, got all the acronyms going again,
Yep.
right? They went super specific,
Yeah.
and they were like, we're going to put this over here, we're going to have this kind of zoning, and this
Yep.
is what color it's going to be, and this is
Yep.
when we're turning the, right?
I mean-
and then you didn't deliver on it. We didn't deliver on it, okay? Or it takes more time, or what have you.
The whole town
So-
didn't deliver on it.
So
Opposition, everything
that's
came
why I think Scott gave me a little religion, and he was like, let's loosen this up a little bit so that we have room to move,
Yep.
okay? Versus,
the thing about the
and I think,
plan is it's a plan.
yeah,
They're not zoning regulations, they're not laws, they're
Right.
plans. Plans can change. Laws can change, but it's not like it's carved in stone. It's a plan.
Right.
You can say anything you want. It's fine, as long as it seems reasonable to people. Because I don't think we want the townspeople to look at us and say, well, that's never gonna happen. You want them to say, that's interesting, maybe I'd like to see that done. Or how can we accomplish that? Something that's a reasonable plan, I think people would like to see.
Chris, one thing that's important is when we use the concept that it's a plan and it can be modified, chances are it's only going to be modified in connection with an application more likely. Like ours was amended, our POCD was amended in 2021. I don't know if you've seen the amendment. It's not up on our website. But, you know, saying that it can only be amended, I mean, we can always amend it. I mean, I just think that's, I think it's better to go at a higher level. I've lost my train of thought now, so let me.
It's
let
not
me
even
hold
that it
off.
could be amended. Okay, we could have a vision for this, and someone could come along and say, you know, I had this idea, I want to put this little grocery store over here, and town plan and zoning could say, wow, we never thought of that. Maybe we could use a grocery store there. And then they could say, okay, well, let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Public meeting, and then do that. It's not in the plan, but someone comes along with an idea and they,
Yeah,
that's
no,
not,
yeah,
we
yeah,
can't,
I-
we can't do it. It's
My
not in
senior
our
moment's
plan.
over. My
Okay.
senior moment's over,
ahead.
and why that doesn't work. And I think Justin can weigh in on that a little bit. And you'll watch the zoning meetings, and why that, and I don't wanna have another senior moment, is that you need to make sure that your POCD comports, and so that anybody that needs to come in and say, hey, I need to try a new idea, I need to do you a little bit different in the zoning, instead of 1 unit per acre, I need 2 units, all right, or I need 30 feet setback instead of 50 feet setback, something like that. In other words, so you need to have the POCD, so any of those changes need to be comport with the POCD. So to say that, oh, I can have a POCD that doesn't allow for that, you gotta be careful that, and that you have a POCD that allows you to refer to that, because when you make a finding to change the zoning regs, when TP&Z will do that, right, if they need to, with those great ideas, you need to say, well, does this comply with the POCD?
And if your POCD is vague enough,
Well, and I see
you got
that's.
some, you
yeah.
got some wiggle room.
But
Or if
for,
it's
for
specific
instance,
enough, you
one
don't
of
have
the,
any.
one of the
that's what
changes in 21 was to take out a predefined, I don't want to say they took out, so they took out in the 21 amendment, TP&Z, they took out for mixed use down in the flats, they took out the predefined modifier of modest. Now, I'm not saying they took it out because they wanted excessive, or not excessive, but they wanted high. I'm not saying they took out modest because they
They
wanted
took the
high,
word
but
modest out.
they took the
Okay.
word modest out
Okay.
of mixed use. So our goal was to favor condos over rentals. They took that out, right? Because if somebody wanted to build a rental, right, it doesn't comport with the POCD. If they took modest out, because if somebody wanted to do something that somebody might say is not modest, it's 2 rather than 1, it's a doubling of the density. 1 to 2 is 100% change in density. Oh my God. So you'd go from 1 to 2, 100% change, right? You didn't want to have modest in there. Now, I'm not suggesting they wanted high, but it's an example of what I think the POCD's got to consider, because if you're lobbying for modest in the POCD, then you're shorting zoning potential. Another barrier when somebody with a good idea comes in, and if I got money, right, and I want as easy as I can to get it up, because that's the speed and get in and out, right, to get this built, to get something, get an investment in the ground for Woodbridge, was what we want, to welcome them. I'm not going to come to Woodbridge with that. I'm not going to play that game. And quite frankly, as a helping on the EDC, I don't want to play that game. I grew up in this town too. My friends, my friends were all your friends, and so I don't want to play that game even.
How do we bring this back to where we are today?
So-
especially, given the LOTSIP grant, given the plans for the flats.
I think my take on this, and I'm
Yeah.
open, right, is when you look at importing the goals from the Board of Selectmen,
Yep.
okay, I think they do a good job and they give us the room to move. I think what the conversations we're having, right, are around the setup.
Right. And also, one of my recommendations would be, I like what we did with the Board of Ed stuff, but in listening to Chris's comments, maybe we could work on some of the language a little bit to soften what has been
Yeah.
done in the flats. I mean, but I do like the call to action and the tone. I do like it, and because I want to get us moving. But I think we can soften some of the
My other-
stuff in the beginning. Yeah.
My other big piece of feedback on this is I think we should, Scott, integrate just some language here and there that ties us back to our mission, right? In that this will help drive the tax base for the town, lessen the tax burden on the residents, right? We should bring it back to that. I get, so when I see, formulate business development plan, and I know this isn't the Board of Selectmen, right?
These are the goals, yeah, these are.
Right,
their
the goals. So formulate business development plan including future needs for workforce housing and transportation, right? Great. Workforce housing ties back to, we need workforce housing in order to drive the economy, right? In order to drive the business culture. Just tagging in there that it should deliver a revenue accretive benefit to Woodbridge, right? So when we talk about these things, it should, at the end of the day, with all of the pieces that are in play, additional services, right? Is it going to bring additional tax revenue at the end of the day? It should be revenue accretive to Woodbridge. I think that would support our mission and our charge as an EDC.
I don't know about that. I would prefer not to weigh in on that, because I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know if, I'd let TPZ, I don't know, I mean, the person that made the comment about, why would you want 55? We need kids in this community. We need to grow. So I'm not quite sure that it has to be a
Would
profit
you-
model and say everything's got to be accretive. And
No, but-
our whole goal is to reduce our taxes.
Right.
And that concerns me a little bit. I see it more as just building vibrant villages, a sustainable Woodbridge, vibrant communities, vibrant neighborhoods,
And-
and not necessarily neighborhoods that are the most cost effective. Oh, we can make the most money. Well, then let's say put a
Well-
sign out there. We can only invite so many people to live here that are wealthy that'll keep our taxes down,
Right.
Or something like that.
But I think that
I think that's
But we shouldn't
Yeah.
have a plan that in the end is gonna cost us more in taxes.
oh, absolutely not. You got to be.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, you got to
Right.
be responsible and sustainable growth.
As just so
Right?
so maybe
But-
just
but,
some,
but I don't like this idea of economics like accretive. We got to make a profit. I don't. That's what I'm having trouble with. Like sustainable. Now that's what Connecticut did. They changed. They used to have OPM do that, right? And they
Yeah.
changed it to, sustainable CT, and they do their plan every 5 years. And, it's the kind of thing where I think that's where they're going. It's sustainable. This is the trend in the POCDs to try to think how we can be sustainable. And so they ask you to look at your areas where you can build vibrant neighborhoods, if you don't like the word village, or vibrant communities, and
I'm just wondering where the villages are gonna go.
no neighborhoods.
So- I
like the word village.
But neighborhoods.
Yeah.
Okay, neighborhoods.
Because to me,
They're
a
all the
village
same.
is the whole thing is a village. Like when they wanted to call Woodbridge Village a village, I'm like, well, the whole thing's a village. Call it something different. I like the flats because it's part of Woodbridge, but a village is, the whole town is a village. To me, the whole
Right.
town is a village, and then we'll look at different parts of the town, but it's all.
But I also think it forms a community too, don't you, down there? The flats, I think.
We have
is-
a community in the
There's
flats.
no question. There's
We
no
have a
question.
community in
And
the
and
flats.
proud of it,
Yeah.
and proud of it.
I love
and,
that.
And a neighborhood, and proud of it. Same thing in other areas. I'm suggesting, if you want to own the name village, I thought it was flats, but if you want to own the name village, but I'm saying
I like
create
flats.
You like
create the
flats.
next village. You know what I
Right.
mean? But create the heights.
Yeah.
Create the lowlands. I don't care. Create the whatever.
Clover Hill.
Yeah, Clover Hill.
So
Roger Sherman.
So-
Roger Sherman.
No, I mean, but I think
The
the,
great
the
compromise.
point is, and I appreciate where Steve's going, like, where are we going with this, right? How do we bring this home, right? Are we aligned around this idea of vibrant villages in the context of driving the economic base for the town, right? But by having vibrant villages, okay, that leads to our mission, okay, which is growing the tax base, lessening the burden on the residents. And if we want to lead with kind of that as an umbrella, right? And then the goals under here tie into it, because I think the goals tie back to 2030. They tie back to, hey, we need to have an overarching plan, not just a plan for the flats. Okay? We've got a country club that we're going to talk about a little bit later, right? Like, what could that be? Is it fair game? Is it, where that's going to be decided in the next 6 months, right? So I think we lead with vibrant villages. I just want to have the context, and not because I'm an evil capitalist or anything. But I think our group, if we're doing what we're supposed to be doing for the town, okay, they're expecting us to come back with ways like, let's lessen the tax burden. Or if Sherry was here tonight, she made a great, when I spoke with her over the weekend, she made a great comment. She said she talked about increasing the value of Woodbridge, okay, for the residents, which kind of reframed the whole thing for me, right? There's, how do we cut the taxes? Because we know the valves went out, right? So everyone is chirping, and the question is, what am I getting?
Yeah,
for
what am I
this?
getting for my tax?
Right?
Yeah.
So that's another way to cut it, right? That I never really thought about. Like, what am I getting for my dollar?
Right.
Okay, the price may be going up, right? But am I getting amenities? Am I getting, right? So, but I think we need to tie back to that in what we do. So if we're gonna talk about workforce housing, okay, with the end game of driving the tax base, right? I mean, I think that's what we're here to do.
Run it by consultants and counsel, then that might be my only comment, to make sure that they are happy with the way that's phrased.
You're to who?
Yeah, just when that's phrased, I just say, make sure, we just don't, I always worry about economic zoning and those, things like that, that we
Right.
want to zone for economics. So anyway, not a big issue. I
Right,
agree
but
with
we
you.
have other boards and commissions, right, that are responsible for other
Other
areas,
things,
and
yeah.
we all kind of come together to create Great Woodbridge. But I think this is our lane,
Yeah.
in my view, right? And through this, we
Yeah.
can contribute to housing, okay, in a way that leads to economic growth
Okay.
for the town. I don't know.
I agree.
That's
You said housing, but you also mean commercial development as well.
commercial development, right?
Mhm.
Right. I mean, I think.
Yeah.
Can we attract businesses to Woodbridge by having workforce housing?
Yes.
Right.
mean,
I mean, I
that's the
think
question.
that's now we're serving it up under our charge. Just that's my 2 cents on it. I mean, I'm open to.
Okay.
So
So what does that mean for this document?
right. So, do you want to take like a cut at modifying some of the lead-in, or?
Can I
How
ask
do-
questions before you do that?
Yeah, sure.
Before we go down that rabbit hole? This is for TPZ?
Recommendation from us to TPC as to what they should be doing in the POCD. What our vision for their POCD is when it comes to EDC.
Okay, so it's not direction to go do this now. This is when
So at
something comes
POCD,
down the line,
yep.
you need to have an open mind and be prepared to change the regulations of the town so we can achieve bigger grand lists, more
Mhm.
businesses, some kind of newer villages. You need to be ready to move when people show up at your
That's all we can tell you, right? That's, we can't necessarily make that happen. That's in your
No,
court.
but our input is
Right.
we need more room,
Yeah.
okay, in order to deliver on the mission, right? From a zoning standpoint, and it could be multiple villages, right? But I think it gives us room to move, right?
And Johnny, the other thing is that a POCD, I shouldn't say many, but I know of towns that it's a plan that you do for conservation and development. It's a 10-year plan that you have to do every 10 years to make that plan. But the implementation of that plan can be 20 years. So in other words, you can check it, right? The state of Connecticut checks their state POCD every 5. We check ours every 10 because we're municipalities. We probably don't have the resources and can't go through this every 10 years because we'll fall all over each other all the time. But you could think of this also as that kind of long range, 20 years, I'll be gone, when this kind of happens, or at least I will be. And, that's, I think, a different perspective to put in there. Is real strategic long-range planning, and that's why I like that more baskets. Not that you have to create the baskets in 5 years or 2 years. They have in there short, medium, long. I mean, I would rather see us say, look, we got to start thinking this way for sustainable, and not just jump down somebody's throat when they talk about another area in town that could be a neighborhood or community that makes us thrive, and just to say, no way, so anyway, it's in the writing, so I have trouble tweaking it, but, so maybe
I'm happy to do it.
It's maybe somebody's better, because I
I'll-
have trouble softening it because I don't see the soften to it.
And Scott, if I'm going to jump documents here, remind me again the intent of this document.
So that was my initial attempt at modifying 2015 and kind of going through and saying, hey, what's in there, what needs to change? And when I spoke with Scott, and he and I kind of went through it, he said, hey, we should probably, given that this is every 10 years, not just iterate off of what was done 10 years ago, right? So that's sort of where this came to fruition, but that's there kind of for
Right,
reference.
if you're going the action agenda items for a goal, that now your goal is a bit more sustainable for the longer range future, then you wouldn't want to just look at the action items for a goal that's not there now. You've taken a sort of a different approach to saying, so I think it's to make it a little bit not near-term action oriented from our EDC point of view, except for the stuff that's traditional EDC, right? This is the big picture stuff, this is the good stuff. The stuff that but you know, business retention, business outreach, welcome wagon, all those kinds of things, you know, that's not long range stuff. So all that stuff is in the goals from the Board of Selectmen. So we should be doing all that stuff. Studies, you know, we should be, for instance, if they build that property up on Fountain Street, you know, if they apply for the 88 units going in there, we should immediately, in my opinion, as the ADC, we can get without personal identifying information, but we can find out what 88 units produces in school-age children. And we track that, you know. And we start collecting our data that's unique to the town. Other towns have done that, and they've become pretty successful. And this is not like peeking behind the thing, like, oh, what kid's going there? But you know the addresses, and you know what did that unit. So if, you know, everybody wants to come to Woodbridge for our schools, and we get no kids in 88 units, it's a data point. If we get 250 kids in 88 units, you know, then we'll know that too. So that's, I think, something that the EDC can be doing apart from this POCD stuff, is starting to create that data and knowledge base and then pass it on to the next generations. What we learn from doing that, rather than saying, here's what we think would happen. So I think that's important.
Yeah, that seemed to make sense to me.
Okay. My only other suggestion here was just, and Justin, when I was reading through the Board of Selectmen goals, I mean, I just probably sequencing some of this, right? Like the identifying multiple areas for new and vibrant communities, that should come a little further up the list. Like if I'm reading this as this, then this, then this, right? Like, so I'll take a stab at sort of moving things around. And if you have a Word doc version of this,
I sure do.
Just do the changes to it.
You know, I type it all over again.
No.
But I think the formulate, and you know, this came from, I think, the selectmen, right? Of course, because I said it did. But formulate a business development plan, including future needs for workforce. I mean, that's something with, you know, Justin and the Board of Selectmen, and because you're working out of the First Selectman's office, you know, and I think that may have a lot, you know, that's what we're doing. When we have a business development plan, we'll start to see it come together.
Mm-hmm.
I like that one as number one. Like,
Oh yeah, I do, right? So you develop the plan, and then it's sort of, it's like, okay, what target business sectors? That should come way ahead of, before we talk about, okay, we need to build workforce housing. We should understand
So
the
what's
sectors
coming
so
in,
we
yeah.
know like what kind of workforce we're looking for, right? That's my take on it.
Agreed.
So what do you think, gang?
Yes. So, do we make a motion to?
Not until we have something to
Okay.
to approve. So, Tony, can we route? We can't approve it based on kind of making changes and emailing it around and getting input.
Well, I mean, if you wanna go, so you're thinking of softening it? I mean, we could actually work through it if you want to. If your goal is to have this produced and approved today,
Mm-hmm.
because you can't motion. You know,
Just
you have-
what do you think the timing
meet
is? Do you
over
think
the-
that they're
can't
sort of
meet
pushed
tonight.
back a little bit? Yeah, please. Do you think they're pushed back a little bit on the POCD? Like, you know, do we need to, or can we just squeeze it in January? Do you think, or it's a hard deliverable right now?
So, Scott, what were you told when you were handed the assignment, essentially?
The email said 12/31.
12/31.
Let's do it tonight.
You know, I'm going to be honest, I don't know how hard that deadline is. I know that SLR is going to be doing some outreach sessions with the different groups in January. So to me, I think it makes sense if you want to take a little time to keep going through it, keep mulling it over, and then pass a final version in January. I think that makes sense. it might not hurt to send, just a note to whoever you have to send it to, stating that, we're nearly done, we're
Right.
finalizing a few things.
So if we were to modify this, right, and then just route it as an email, not vote on it. Okay, so we have something that we
It's our working draft.
our working draft we can send to them and say, listen, on January 9th, we're gonna vote right as a group, because we don't have Sherry here, we don't have Cliff here.
Right.
Right, so we're not, I'm not comfortable voting on it. I mean, we have a quorum and everything else, but I'd like them,
Do we have a website, Tony, where we can post things? Like, you know how like TPZ has a website, like we could put up, working draft of vision, EDC's vision for the POCD recommendation.
What we've typically done, like for Coop-Hop, is once it's finalized, we put the final document together. I wouldn't suggest putting a working document up necessarily.
They do in some of the, like for instance, the state does. And,
Are those hearings that you're talking,
no, they put up their working doc and then they're in hearing stage now for their state POCD.
why
But
would
that-
we
it
want
came
to
in
put a
later.
working document that you've all not agreed to yet on the website? Like, I don't know what.
Well, it allows SLR to start thinking.
Is this a working document that everybody has access to, like the public?
Yeah, why not?
Well, that's what I'm
Open
saying.
and fair. Oh.
The reason I don't like it is because they'll look at draft information and they'll run
They'll
wild
run with it, yeah.
Right.
I agree with that.
Okay.
I don't think it necessarily hurts to send the draft to SLR in the sense of, just essentially showing that you're not just kicking the can down the road, like you're actually working on it. You know what I mean?
right.
So,
I guess my point is, we can probably, through email, get everyone aligned and
I would
vote.
hesitate to do that because it's not an open meeting at that point. Because
Right.
then those emails
I
are
was
all
wondering if you
reliable.
could someone get around that. by
Suppose I
posting
email
it,
them individually.
I'm no lawyer, but I still wouldn't recommend it.
Right, okay.
What you could do is make the changes, but I don't know that we've all agreed to what the changes should be. I'm not sure.
That's what I wanna,
I mean, you could draft changes and then send it to everyone to review for the next meeting,
Right.
but they shouldn't be commenting back and forth.
Right.
okay.
Okay, okay.
At that point, we could, it could be a 5-minute special meeting.
You could. You could
At
even,
an off-site location for our holiday each year.
well, honestly, but that is true. You could do even a virtual meeting. If you just did a Zoom
Yeah.
kind of thing.
A quick
Right.
Zoom, just to say, yep, this is it.
Okay.
Right.
Well,
Yeah, I'd like to see what you come up with, Scott.
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah, and again, I want Cliff and Sherry to weigh in on this too.
okay,
That's right.
okay.
Since I'm sitting up here, I had a few thoughts, if you don't mind.
Sure.
One thing that I think is important to remember with this process is, first of all, I like getting away from the very, very specific nature of the previous one, because the specific nature does create issues later on. It makes it more difficult, then you need amendments to the plan, there's a whole, issue that goes along with that. That said, one of the things that's important to remember is the POCD is what opens up grant funding later on. So in terms of when you say mentioning, okay, we're gonna look at not only the flats, we're gonna look at potentially other sites, you can then use that in a grant application to say, hey, we said in the plan of conservation we're gonna look for that, so now there's funding for an economic development plan for, different areas or something like that. You can use that to say, state, give us money for this. So it's important to include those things. The other thing I was gonna mention was, the nice thing with, as I was reviewing this draft, I like that it allows for, it's a plan that allows for future planning, essentially. Because there's not a set direction yet, and I think it's been interesting over the past couple months with Woodbridge because there's so much going on in a lot of really good ways. But because there's so much going on, it's hard to pinpoint anything down. So things like the lots of grant for the flats area, that's going to create a lot of really positive effects. But how do we incorporate that into other things? We're not quite there yet to know. So it's important to have it phrased in a way that's like this, which I think is very positive. And then the other thing I was going to mention is, one of the goals in here is, the tax abatement incentives, that kind of thing. I think that's very important because it's something that's going to draw, if you're a business you have that critical mass of people in the radius, but what's going to make them come here as opposed to 500 feet up the road in New Haven? So what's going to bring them here? Investment in capital follows the path of least resistance. So not only the zoning regulations, the general feel of the community, but also what are the incentives bringing them here? Tax abatements are always kind of nice because they don't lose the town any money in the meantime. They're still paying what you owe. However, in the future, it's going to be ramping up. So I think that's important. My opinion, I would move that sort of up the rung a bit on the recommendation list, sort of after figuring out the details of like what you were talking about, the business sectors that are in demand, all that kind of information. Those were my sort of overarching thoughts as I was listening to you guys. I thought it was a great discussion also. I thought it was very productive.
So I do want to send you the work that we have done on abatements.
Sure.
On an incentive plan.
Love to see that, yeah.
More than a year ago, probably 2 years ago. Just so you can kind of see the bones of
That would
where
be
we
great.
were.
Yep.
It was sort of left as, all right, we'll put that in a drawer, and when we need it, we'll pursue it. Versus having a standing, come get your money from Woodbridge type of a thing, right?
Sure.
So,
The thing with that is if a developer or a business or someone is looking for something, they're not going to know that that's sitting in a drawer.
no, I know.
So
It's a chip,
Yeah.
right? Later on, like,
right. Right.
So,
Right.
yeah, you can use it to promote, right? Versus
Exactly. Kind of market the town.
seal the deal.
Yeah. Right.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Good.
We're good.
Good.
The plan.
We
Okay.
have a plan to plan to plan.
All right. So step 3 is a motion to adjourn.
I so move.
Okay. Second, Scott. All in favor?
Aye.
Good.
Thank you for including me.
Number 2, our regular meeting of the Economic Development Commission of Woodbridge, Thursday, December 12th. It is 6 p.m. First item on the agenda is to vote on the minutes from July 13th. So I have a motion to approve minutes.
So moved.
Steve?
Second.
Cliff, seconds. All in favor?
Abstain.
Okay.
I was an error. I abstained.
You're gonna abstain.
I wasn't there.
I know nothing of what you.
I wasn't there.
Right. Okay. So our guest this evening is David Fink from, I'm gonna say from Scrog, but I know you're not at Scrog anymore. So
No, I am in Scrog.
You are?
I'm
Okay.
a consultant.
A consultant. Okay. And really wanted to chat with us about housing. Believe it or not, we just had our whole conversation on our POC. So, housing is an economic driver, right?
Did you the microphone? Sorry.
I did it again. All right, it's Thursday now. So housing is an economic driver, and really, hopefully, we get into workforce housing and how that can help drive our business community here in Woodbridge. And so I'll turn it over to you.
All right, well, thanks for inviting me. I know you have a big meeting, so I don't want to take too long. So I wanted to do 3 things. I wanted to take you very quickly through the basics. I know you guys are pretty savvy, so you probably know some of this already, but we'll go through it quickly. Then my rule is always, I do work for Scrog for the 15 towns, and so my rule is never to tell a town what to do, in part because I don't know enough about the towns, and if I did, it's not my place to do that. But I will tell you what other towns are doing. And then the third thing is just to take questions and have a discussion if you want to talk about that. A little bit about me. I've been Scrog's housing policy consultant this is the 5th year. I'm going to, I think, finally hang it up at the end of June and try to retire. I tried about 7 years ago and failed miserably at that, so I'm going to try to do it. My wife and I are married 50 years in June, and we need some time together. At least she thinks we need time together. Sure.
To be continued.
Yeah, I started back when I was 24 as a newspaper reporter and editor. I did that for 27 years. I was at 5 papers. I was at USA Today and a national correspondent, and I was over in the Middle East for a while. And then I came to the Current after our first child was born. I was at the Current for 17 years, and I covered the legislature and politics, and I was the political editor and the government editor and then editor of the editorial page. And then when the newspaper business started slowly declining, I didn't think I could handle personally the drip, 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 so I left. I had 2 college educations to pay for, and I was the press secretary for the Speaker of the House for 2 years, and then I left and I got into housing policy stuff. So I've been doing that for about 23 years. Most of it for the Partnership for Strong Communities, which is a statewide housing policy organization. And then when I tried to retire, Scrog asked me if I would help the towns in the region. And the point being that it would be folly for me to tell any town what to do, because like I said, I don't know enough. But the towns are different, and you know that. You know your town better than me. It's from the demography and the topography to the politics to the housing market. They're different, and there's no one size fits all. So what we've been trying to do is meet with, I've done some townwide meetings, just did one 2 weeks ago in Guilford, going to do another in Hamden next month, done it in Madison, a few other towns, met with zoning commissions. I was at this zoning commission, I think it was during the summer. And the EDCs have wanted to meet with me. So this is the 5th Economic Development Commission I'm meeting with. And their reason is that they have been hearing from employers in town who are having a hard time filling jobs in some cases. I don't know about your employers. I'm sure you are in closer touch with them. But the reason generally has been in these towns that it used to be, even if you didn't have potential workers in labor pool living in the town, they would drive from 3, 4, 5 towns over for that job. Well, now they can get that job in their town. And so it's been hard to do it. I was in North Branford, if you can believe that. They have a big Honeywell facility there, and Honeywell's having a hard time filling those jobs. So they are about to approve a 120-unit multifamily development in North Branford, which is not something I think about when I think about North Branford. It's a fairly rural town. But anyway, like I said, every town is different, and we can talk about that, and you all know your business community better than I, and at least what your hopes are for its development. So I just want to take you quickly through this, because some people are surprised by these numbers. So as you probably know, housing is the largest part of the average budget. It's 32%. Generally, it's 19% for transportation, and then another 6 to 12% for energy. The 19% goes down to 9%. Reconnecting America found out if you live within a half a mile of any kind of mass transit, and you can take that and use your car less, and therefore pay less for gas and maintenance and insurance, your transportation cost goes down. You don't have a rail station here, so it's less of an issue here. An affordable home, people ask me, what is it? What's affordable housing? I say it's housing you can afford. They think I'm begging the question. It's not really true. It's, when I got my first apartment, my folks told me, don't spend more than 25% of your income on rent, because you need some money left over for gas and food and all that. HUD puts it at 30%. They say if you're spending more than 30%, that's the third item, you're burdened by your housing costs. Nationally, it's about the same as Connecticut. Connecticut's 49% of renters and 32% of homeowners are burdened. It's a little different in Woodbridge. 63% of renters and 20% are. There are people who are severely burdened. There are 128,000 households in the state where they're spending more than 50% of their income housing, which is crazy, but that's the reality for them. There is this thing, the fourth item, called ALICE. I don't know if you've heard about that. United Way of Connecticut has done a study, like about 15 United Ways around the country. ALICE is an acronym that stands for Asset Limited Income Constrained Employed. These are people we used to call working poor. So they're largely invisible in the community. They go to work, they pay their bills, they do all their stuff, but they just make it. The numbers that United Way in their study have put it is it's about $108,000 for a household of 4, child and an infant, sometimes a single parent and a grandpa or someone like that, and for an individual about $39,000. there are a lot. In Woodridge, you have many fewer. Every other town in the region has at least 18% of their households are Alice households.
And 140 of the 169 towns.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
Greater than
it's
20%.
widespread because,
Yeah.
as you know, you probably know this from national statistics. New York normally leads the pack in wealth disparity. Connecticut is second.
Okay.
And-
So for the
and-
individual, it's 39,000?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
The housing wage is something calculated by the National Income Housing Coalition. It's basically what you need to pay, or earn an hour rather, for to afford a typical two-bedroom apartment in the state. Statewide, it's $34.54, and that translates to $71,000 a year. So, you know, and the median wage of a Connecticut renter is $54,000.
So,
So,
David, I did have a question on
yeah,
that
yeah.
when I saw it, and
Yeah.
I won't interrupt the whole time,
Yeah.
I promise. So 3454, is that for the household or for the individual?
well, it probably would be the household.
The household?
Yeah.
Okay.
meet
For a
the
two-bedroom.
rent. So you could, you know, so if mom's making 35,000 and dad's making 35,000, then
Right,
they can cover the rent.
they can cover
of
a
a typical
two-bedroom.
two-bedroom, but,
Yeah. And then for median wage for a renter, that's probably the individual?
that's an individual, yeah.
Median wage is
4,000.
for the individual versus they would need 71K as a
Right.
household. Okay.
Connecticut has the seventh highest median monthly housing cost. That's to own a home. It's a little, we're in a little better shape rental-wise. We're about 12th or 13th. And the point there is that since the beginning of the pandemic, housing prices, to buy a home, housing prices have risen about 70% in the state.
Mm-hmm.
What that's done is it's taken a lot of people at the low to moderate end of the income spectrum and pushed them into the rental market.
Mm.
So that has driven up rental prices about 30% in the state, and the ripple effect has been that has caused a pretty significant increase in homelessness. And so I've been getting calls from Greater New Haven, United Way, some of the service providers in the New Haven area, Columbus House, New Reach, Bethel in Milford, to say that they, you know, David, can you help us find more money for warming shelters for the really cold nights? You know,
We're
with-
just going through our revow right now, and I think we were probably all going to attest that we're going to have pretty significant increases in the revaluation, obviously,
Right.
that it lowers the mill rate, but this one drives home to us currently today.
Do we know-
Housing is up.
Right, so you think that that's one factor why, I mean, housing prices are rising because people aren't leaving their homes.
Well, they're not leaving their homes because there's no place for them to go.
Right.
So
So,
it's a supply issue. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, there was a great piece in the New York Times Magazine about 20 years ago that said, everything I need to know I learned in kindergarten. Well, everything you need to know about housing you learned in Economics 101. It's supply and demand. You have enough supply to meet the demand, the price stays down. You don't have enough supply, the price goes up.
but if people are not leaving their homes, okay, and this effect is happening, we're not seeing this population boom in Connecticut
No.
that's driving all of this. So
Well-
that's sort of the disconnect for me, is that if there was all this demand for housing, you would think that there's this influx and, you know, you would see a huge
No,
increase. but
it's
the
more
population's been
demography
pretty-
than population. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, we saw, and I was still at the partnership at this point. What happened was in 2010, roughly. You know, everybody thinks it was because we had the real estate crash in 2008 and the market went down, but really what happened in 2010 was that baby boomers, people my age, were the largest wave of them began to retire. Or at least want to downsize because the kids are gone and they want to rake the leaves and shovel the snow. And my millennial children, our millennial children, started reaching childbearing, home buying age. But they all wanted the same kind of multifamily unit because the baby boomers wanted to downsize into a rental, a nice rental or a condo, townhome. And their millennial children, for two reasons, because their lifestyle was not to own a 4-bedroom colonial, you know, with a nice picket fence around it, and because they have fairly high education debt. The education debt in Connecticut is $36,800 on average, but if you've gone to graduate school or private school, it's north of that. So we had suddenly this convergence of demand for multifamily housing, which most towns didn't have. And the reason most towns didn't have them is because, as you know, in a beautiful town like this, that was rural and had farms and all that. I mean, most towns in Connecticut never had any multifamily housing. They never built it. The way housing happened was a guy would buy a 40-acre cornfield or cow pasture and say, I want to put up 40 colonials on 1-acre lots. And the town said, fine. The guy built them in 18 months, and he sold them in 6 months, and everybody was happy. And that was fine, because baby boomers from this, the early 70s to the early 2010s lived in those homes for 40 years. But then they got old and the kids were gone and they wanted to downsize and they wanted, that multifamily unit, and their kids wanted that multifamily unit. And so that's why we have limited supply. And the problem is, where cities have redevelopment authorities and, they're denser to begin with, and they'll knock down housing. They don't think that just because something's there, something else couldn't be there. Like I hear a lot of towns say we're built out. Well, I say there's no such thing as built out, because you'd never see a crane in Manhattan. There are not a lot of homes left there from the 1600s and 1700s. They knocked them down, they built other stuff. So you can do that, but it's not the town's fault. Towns never had to proactively think about, well, what housing do we have, and what do we need, and where are we going to put it, and who's going to build it, and that's just not next. And they're not built to do that either. A bunch of towns don't have planners. Even more towns don't have economic and community development directors. At least one person who gets up every day and thinks about what the town's housing needs are. So that's what towns are learning to do. And
David, could I interrupt with one quick?
Yeah.
Would you like to run through this or take questions? While we're doing
either way,
I started it,
I know you did.
so, all right.
either way, I mean, if it's a burning question,
All housing is good housing. I've heard that.
Right.
Because, but at the same time, is we need a diversified middle housing. We need the whole range so we can be vibrant.
right?
I've heard people say though that when you build housing, that maybe, let's say you build a 55 active community. We built Toll Brothers, put in 70 units of,
Right.
and that's not affordable because they were going for about $700,000 a unit. So
Right.
they're really, they're a little bit priced on the high end.
Right.
But, does that roll through the market, creating additional supply? And
Sure.
Back to your supply-demand theory.
I mean-
I've heard that it does, but I'd love to hear it again, because I worry that just building $700,000 houses is going to really help, the lower end.
Well, it
Starter
can. I
homes.
mean, there is trickle down, because think of it this way.
Yeah.
There's not enough single-family homes on the market, right? Because people have nowhere to go, so they don't sell. But they want to, because they don't want to take care of the house anymore. And so there's not enough supply to meet the demand, especially in a beautiful town like this. People want to live here. If they suddenly have a place to go, more single-family homes on the market, more supply, the price doesn't escalate as quickly, and therefore doesn't drive as many people out of the home buying market. So that, and into the rental market, so it lessens the demand pressure in the rental market, and so those prices can tend to stabilize. The problem, and I know I've heard this in a million towns, and we can talk about it. Well, you get a lot of school kids if you build multifamily housing. Well, that's not true, and we can go through those numbers. You get a lot of school kids if you build single-family homes. And what would happen in this case is that, it would lessen demand pressure, and there would be trickle down there. However, if you suddenly put more single-family homes on the market, you're going to get families moving in. And families, young families, do have school children. So you'll get more school children if you free up more single-family supply, or you build more single-family supply. So that's an impact of that. But yeah, Scott, there is trickle down. Here I am. So I did have, under this seventh highest median monthly housing cost, median sales price in the state is $440,000, up about 10% in this calendar year, 2024. Woodbridge, according to Realtor.com, and there's some fluctuation, Redfin and Zillow, but it's roughly about 640,000 as of the end of October. So I can't vouch for what's happened in the last 6 weeks or so. Myths and misconceptions, you hear that a lot. The research has shown that multifamily housing doesn't bring you a lot of school kids. Rutgers did most of that research back about 15 years ago, and it's been borne out by many anecdotal. I can go through all those numbers for you, but the anecdotal evidence at a lot of multifamily developments. Property values, MIT did that research about 15 years ago, and it doesn't lower property values. Although I would say, I mean, you know, it's obvious to me if you built a 20-story multifamily building in the middle of a single-family neighborhood of 2-acre lots, some people might not want to live next door to it. But by and large, multifamily housing does not lower property values.
How many bedrooms are in a typical multifamily?
I'm sorry?
How many bedrooms are in a typical multifamily?
Well, the 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms. I mean, that's a good question because that was what Rutgers was looking at. What they did not do is extrapolations. They used actual census data, and they looked at the actual number of public school-age children ages 5 to 19 in every state. So Connecticut, what they found was that in a 1-bedroom multifamily unit in Connecticut, you would get 0.04 public school-age children. In other words, 4 public school-age children in every 100 1-bedroom units. And when you think about that, it stands to reason. I mean, how many parents are going to live in a 1-bedroom with a child? Like I said, I've been doing this about 23 years. I've seen that one time where the mom had a bed in the bedroom and a bed in the living room. But so that 2-bedroom, Rutgers found 0.27, or in other words, 1 public school age child for every 4 2-bedroom units. And again, it's intuitive. 2 bedrooms are going to be 2 singles sharing, or a young couple that wants a 2nd bedroom as an office and for guests, or grandma who wants a 2nd bedroom for the grandkids when they come for the weekend. 1 out of 4 times it's a parent and a child. 3-bedroom, you start getting more. You get 1.38, so you'll get there. But really, you know, if you see an increase in school-age children in single-family homes. I'm sorry.
Does the type of multifamily housing change that equation? Like an apartment complex, 3-story home, rows of condos, does that change that equation at all?
They didn't look at that. You know, it can depend. You know, for instance, the latest development I saw, and by the way, if you guys want any more information on this, I have photos, there's a video I can send you and all that. But the last, newest multifamily development I've seen is one in Orange that was done right off of Route 1. I forget the name of the street. I'm sorry?
Liscana, Carol Martin.
Yes, Liscana. It's 46 units. There's a low-income housing tax credit deal built by a woman named Carol Martin, who's just a great person. They did an amazing job. And if you can imagine, the first 10 of the units were saved for people with disabilities and who are elderly. They want to live on 1 floor, no steps. So they did 3 stories, but the first floor are single units, and then the 2nd and 3rd floor are 2 and 3 bedroom units, you know, separate right above them. It is so beautiful. Scott, you've seen it? Yeah, I mean, it's
all the way through the construction.
it's really nice, and you know, again, it depends. But the real issue with school kids is the the number of bedrooms. You know, that's what really changes. So you know, a lot of towns, if you build 1 and 2 bedroom units, you don't get many school children. So anyway, that's the point.
You know, David, I was also thinking and I was saying to Steve I think Orange may get a moratorium or even points into their 2nd moratorium with just Liscana alone. But what do you think about the idea? Like, we see this as Rutgers data. It's 15 years older. Shadi's good question. Is it what kind of, does it depend on the style of the home? How about the value of the home? It's $1 million home versus a $500,000 home. Which one produces school-age children? The $1 million don't. The 500, all that parsing it. How about us tracking our own data? If we have incremental growth, we're having enough data points where we can start tracking our own data to develop our own. I mean, then we really start to fly. rather than not starting it, we need to start something to get the data as to what our town is.
Yeah.
and-
Well, I would say this, I mean, again, I would not be comfortable quoting 15-year-old data
Yeah.
if I didn't know
Yeah.
that developments since then, which I have tracked in towns, bear out that same data. And that, I mean, you don't have to believe me, get in touch with a guy named Mark Barnhart, who's the Economic Community Development Director in Fairfield, who's overseen over the last 20 years, they've added 1,000 units of multifamily housing. And he gets a report every year from their school system, and their schools are just like your schools, very high resource schools, and families want to live in Fairfield to send their kids to school there, and all of the anecdotal evidence, developments I've seen, the numbers are actually lower than the Rutgers data, and that's why I'm comfortable continuing to.
But what I'm saying is, I even think, everybody can sort of poke holes at Fairfield's different than Woodbridge, they got trains we don't, all sorts of stuff. But I just sort of advocate and just get a Mark, somebody should become a Mark Barnhart for our town. So when we have somebody that stands up and says, yeah, I track all this stuff, and I know exactly what Woodbridge does. I don't want to hear what some other town does. I know what Woodbridge does. And we can't do it if we say we can't do it because we don't want to know. So that's sort of a thing that I've seen as a barrier to getting development.
I would recommend, I don't know how you guys, what you've done before and how you want to proceed, but Mark does what you all do. He's the Economic Community Development Director there, and he'd be happy to come in here one night and chat with you guys. I've said if there's one municipal official in the state that I would clone and give to every town, it's Mark. He's a wonderful guy, and he'd be happy to talk to you about that and also what they've done in Fairfield. Just turning it over, why towns are creating more. Obviously, a lot of towns are creating more multifamily housing, especially in this region, because when 95% of your revenue comes from the property tax, they want to develop the property. So they're doing that. Like I said, the EDCs in particular are interested in more customers and more labor pool. Seniors and elderly can downsize and stay in the town because most of them, their friends, their family, their church, the doc are in the town. They live in the town for 35, 40 years, so they want to stay. A lot of people want their adult kids to be able to come over for Sunday dinner. They don't want to just see them on Christmas and Easter, so they'd like their kids to be able to come back and live in the town they grew up in. Younger families also are the ones who volunteer. I'm 73. I don't volunteer to coach the Little League team anymore. I did at one point, but the younger people, the younger families will volunteer to do those jobs, and then. It matters to a lot of towns that their teachers and their police and firefighters and other people live in town. Finally, the 830G statute, I think you're well aware of that. You've had to deal with that. I am creating a video also for SCROG now that will be available to Woodbridge and all the other towns about the 830G statute. We're going to see more 830G proposals because the demand for multifamily housing isn't going away. It's not a sometime thing. It's going to be here for a while.
David, could you explain that? And does everybody know what 830G is? Okay.
Yeah, we can explain it.
I'm sorry?
Yeah, please explain.
Oh, sure. So it was created by the legislature in 1989 and went into effect 1990, so it's had about 34 years of life. It was modeled after a Massachusetts statute and essentially says that if less than 10% of a town's housing stock is income restricted, in other words, either by deed restriction or a condition of low-income financing from the government or some other reason, if less than 10%, and you guys are at about 1.5%, a developer can buy a parcel and override the local zoning. So the town may have zoned it for a certain purpose, except industrial, but the guy can buy the parcel and he can put multifamily housing on it as long as he makes 30% of the units income restricted. for people at 60% of AMI or,
So
area
30%
median
of the
income.
development
Yeah.
needs to be income restricted.
Right.
That
And
works
needless to
within
say, a lot of towns hate it.
Right.
Because basically the developer can come in and put multifamily housing, higher density housing where he or she wants.
When 30% of it.
And, right, and for developers, and I continue to talk to developers, you know, in a lot of towns that don't create higher density zones, it's the only way these developers can get the density they need, because in order for them to make a profit, they need to spread their land costs over more units. So they need to pile the units up a little bit. So, you know, towns have, you know, the antidote to it is for towns recognizing the demand and recognizing that they are subject to, you know, an 830G development proposal, that they can only win in court, that the burden of proof is on the town to show that it would threaten public health or safety, but if towns can't do that, they lose, and they lose 2 out of 3 times. The antidote is to create zoning where you do want it, you know, so it has to be kind of a proactive activity by the town to zone where they want higher density. Typically, towns do that where you would expect they would do it, near the town center where there's already some density in bigger buildings. They do it near a rail or bus station. They do it along a commercial strip or a bus line, where you know the belief is that it won't mess up a neighborhood or get the neighbors won't freak out about it.
If they had lowered 830G to 20%, for instance, would we have seen more housing or more
Yeah,
applications?
absolutely.
In other words, it's a kind of a reverse,
I mean,
perverse
30%
kind of a
is
thing,
hard,
right? Because if
it's
you
hard
require
to do all over.
if
It's
you-
hard to
right. If you
to
require
make
too
the-
much affordable
Yeah.
housing, 30%, then it's kind of like
Well, I
saying
mean-
it's kind of like saying, you know, you've got to build everything affordable. Well, then it can't pencil out.
So-
so it's kind of like so obviously that must have been a compromise to raise the affordable housing requirement, which has the sound of like you're creating more affordable housing, but really you're preventing it, right? Because you're saying if you're going to develop something, you need more affordable housing,
Right.
which doesn't make it pencil, so the developers can't do it. Less 830G applications.
So
it's an
for
in-
example though.
But we go, but I
So-
wanted to bring that out.
So we just had Fountain Street, right?
Correct.
And that to yield
It's got-
12%.
We changed our, TVZ just changed, from 20%, they went down to 12, 6 at 60, 6 at 80,
Yeah.
or 20 at 80.
Right.
You know what?
And they went down
So-
from 20% because
so-
they weren't getting anybody to build any
Right,
housing.
so we built 94 units to yield 12 affordable. Okay.
10,
You s-
10 units, right? 10,
10,
11,
10,
10, 11,
okay.
yeah.
So, put another way, you gotta build 10, bring 10 families, people, houses, we don't wanna get into that, right? But 10 units to, or 100
Yeah.
to get 10.
Are
That's-
there restrictions as well? Other restrictions as well, access to sewer?
Well, yeah, I
Oh,
mean,
on that
in order
change-
to have density, you have to
Right.
have the infrastructure to handle the density. So, towns that have sewer, obviously, and water, you can do that. Yesterday at SCROG, at our housing work group, we had in a fellow named David Kouris, who's the executive director of the new Metropolitan Redevelopment Authority. And that was created by the legislature in 2019, but only funded last year with $60 million in bonding authority. And they are there to provide technical assistance and funding for towns to create more housing. Doesn't have to be affordable. It can be market rate. But the point is that, you know, there are community septic systems that have gotten better. There are also other technologies now that, you know, can get rid of the wastewater for you, and it's very site specific. It depends on the quality of the soil and which way the water's flowing and all that. But the point is that MRDA will be able to provide to a developer in, you know, and a town that wants to create multifamily housing in an area, say with the dough to, you know, put in that wastewater system, which if the developer had to pay for it might make the cost of development prohibitive and not allow them to make a profit. These guys aren't doing it for charity. They want to make a profit. But you know, the point, it's very funny about and Scott, you may not know this, the politics. When they created, the legislature created the 830G statute, the affordable set-aside was only 20%, which is easier for a developer can do. If he's only got to take lower rents for 20% of the units, and he can get market rate rents for 80% of the units, is a much higher likelihood that he's going to make a profit, and he can therefore go ahead with the developer. The housing advocates at the legislature got hoodwinked because they didn't realize that opponents of affordable housing took them to the cleaners. They said, hey, you know what? Let's get more affordable units. Let's bring it up to 30%. And the housing advocates said, great, we'll get 30 affordable units for every 100 that we build. And they said, great, not realizing that that would keep a lot of developers from actually being able to do the deal because they wouldn't make enough profit on 70% of the units being market rate to cover their lower costs, their lower rents of 30%.
Can I get one more quickie? Just so, what basically in our region in New Haven is a single person AMI? In other words, everybody understands how it works on the 30% affordability. I think isn't it like 70,000 or something?
Right.
Like,
I can get it for you. I
regionally
mean,
based.
the state AMI is about $80,000. But you'd be in the New Haven region, so it wouldn't be Woodbridge specific, it would be
Valley
the whole
too.
region. So I don't know if that will come in, because, it's a fairly wealthy region. Most towns are pretty well-to-do, but you have Meriden, and you have New Haven, and you have Hamden and West Haven, and that will lower it. So I can get that for you if you want. I haven't memorized all those. So anyway,
Just one follow-up question, if I could, please. So, in this context, affordable housing is all rental?
no, it can be ownership. That's why I'm going to send you this this video because we took a tour about in a year ago, October, and we went to 4 different configurations. We went to townhomes in Wallingford. We went to congregate development in the north part of Milford near Willis Farms Road, 180 units, beautiful. We went to infill housing, so little townhomes above garages in the south part of Milford. And we went, and this would interest you, to a place called Old Oak Village, which was built by a woman named Liz Verna in Wallingford, right near, just south of the Oakdale Theater. She got, for a pretty good price, a light industrial property. And she built 80 single-family homes, essentially freestanding condos, where the owner, they were about 1,600 square feet, and the owner controls a 6-foot wide strip around, so the owner can put in whatever tomato plants and shrubbery they want. But the rest of the development is handled by the property manager. Now it's the Wallingford Housing Authority. And you'll see on the video that it's 20 years old, and it looks better today than it did when it was built because the landscaping is growing in and all that. And 30% of it was what they're called friendly 830G, where the developer went to the town and said, I want to do this, and the town realized it was going to lose in court if it tried to fight it. So they worked with the developer, and they made sure that the roads and the driveways, allowed easy ingress and egress by the fire department, and they worked with the whole town, and it's a home run because you have 80 single-family homes in this pretty nice neighborhood and 24 of them, 30%, are income restricted for people at 80 and 60% of median. So, as a matter of fact, I'll tell you this: that when we were on the bus tour, Mika was on the tour, and he was looking at that and thinking that, that would, might be a good idea for a town like Woodbridge, which might not want denser housing or a big congregate type, but the single family homes in certain spots might work. So, anyway, I'll send you the link to that.
Thank you.
So, anyway, so that's what other towns are doing. Like I said, the EDCs are interested on behalf of their employers. I don't know enough about what your plans are for bringing business here, expanding business here, or where you would do that.
Yes.
I would imagine it's closer to the Merritt Parkway and not in the north part of town. But you know, that's why I've been invited to these, you know, different EDCs, and I'm happy to answer any other questions that you have. You asked all your questions, right?
Yeah.
Well, no, I thought the data was,
Yeah.
was really eye-opening
Yeah.
and very helpful. You know, as I think in context of workforce housing versus affordable, right? Because that's when we get into 830G and everything. But when we talk about housing that will appeal to someone to say, I'm going to move my business to Woodbridge,
Right.
How do you get a handle around, like, what's the starting point to say, you know, this is the type of housing
Yeah.
that we need? Don't you typically need to start with, you know, just throw houses up and then say,
Yeah.
well, right? What was the, you cited like Honeywell in North Branford, right?
Right.
Very intentional. We have a business, there's no place for the employees to live. I would imagine Honeywell's probably relocating folks from out of town for that. I mean, as maybe not, I don't know.
Well, it's hard, you know, I mean, the famous story is back, you know, in you know, when, I forget if it was John Rowland or Jody Rowe when they were governor, and Pfizer wanted to expand its R&D facility in Groton, and, you know, they were bringing people in because they had facilities in Michigan and Ohio, and they were bringing people in. They found out how much housing cost here, and these people said, forget about it, I'm going back to Michigan. I mean, so a lot of it's the price, and the price is dependent upon the style and configuration and the market.
Right.
I mean, to answer your question, again, you know, it's hard to answer it just in abstract. What I would do, and because you don't have to reinvent the wheel, is, you know, I would have a guy like Mark Barnhart from Fairfield. I'd invite him in. They've created a lot, and he talks to his employers, and he understands the housing market in the town, and he understands how to use everything from community development block grant funds to Department of Housing money. He has a housing trust fund there in Fairfield, and he knows how to mix and match and use the money the right way. For instance, one way is not to subsidize a developer or development. What they did in Fairfield in one case was the town used money in their housing trust fund, which is about $1.5 million they have there, to buy a piece of property and then lease it to a nonprofit developer for $1 a year for 99 years. So now that takes the land cost totally out of it for the developer, and the developer was able to put up a fair number of units there. I mean, they've done a lot of different kinds of housing. So that's number one, to answer your question. Number two, I would invite some developers in here. I just did that for Glastonbury. They wanted to hear from developers. Would our community be a place where you could build? Could you build mixed income housing here, given the market?
Well, would they build
Huh?
versus when you think about the employer,
Well,
right? Those are two different.
but they're not going to build unless there's a market. You can talk to your employers. I don't know. You probably have, or are at least in in
Right.
some kind
Well,
of de facto touch with your employers. You know whether they need workers, whether they need customers.
Ours are healthcare and schools.
Huh?
Schools and healthcare are our employers.
Yeah, and you know,
Right.
so again,
Healthcare.
it's
Well,
you know,
what do you mean?
Well, the healthcare facilities in town are
Okay.
the schools.
I mean,
right?
those are big, and then-
those are the big employers.
And then a lot of retail, right?
Yeah.
So,
But I forget in our POCD, but I'll get that.
right, but I mean, to get to the, okay, so there's a lot of people that live in the area, right? So what I'm trying to get to is like, okay, so for them, the necessity for folks to live in Woodbridge proper versus commute from Orange or West Haven or Hamden or, right? Like, you're gonna say, all right, we're gonna go full throttle and build housing
right.
when the labor supply exists within a reasonable commute.
So then maybe you decide you don't need to do it. You know, I mean, that's what you have to kind of figure out.
I'm trying to ascertain, like, what would be enticing for an employer, right? Like, what does that look like? Because the end game, we're trying to attract, right? And we want our businesses to expand,
Right.
right? And we say, you come to Woodbridge, we're gonna have housing for your workers. Is that enough, right?
Right.
Or would they say, yeah, that's great, but, you know, there's a lot more, there's plenty of housing, there's plenty of labor, right? I don't know.
No, I mean, it's a fair question. I've seen, you know, depending on the town, I live in West Hartford and I've worked in Hartford. There are stores going up and in Frog Hollow on Capitol Avenue in Hartford because they converted some old mills. They put a lot more housing in downtown Hartford. So you not only have the existing employers, but you'll get the bagel shop and the place to get a beer and a burger and an ice cream store and so you'll get some of that. West Hartford, as you all know, because I'm sure you've been there, I live there, and Thursday, Friday, Saturday night, and Sunday, in particular in the spring, summer, and fall, but even now in the winter, people come there not to go necessarily to the restaurants, but just to come and walk in town and get an ice cream cone or go in because there's no place for them to walk in their town.
Right.
And my wife and I will go out for dinner on Saturday night, but Friday night we're not going out, but we might want to take a walk down to the center and just walk around and see some other people. It depends, again, I don't know, and as a commission and from the people you talk to, is there something to create in Woodbridge?
Right.
Can you create that area? And if you put the housing there, that's customers and that's employees for, maybe a whole new place for people to go on, to walk around on Friday night. I mean, it's,
Right.
you guys have to decide what the vision is, but I hope that answers your question. You may have enough workers from the surrounding towns to, fill the jobs here now.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I've got businesses in different towns, right? So I have my favorites. I've got Meriden,
Right.
okay, because I know there are a lot of people that live in Meriden that cut hair that will commute 25 minutes up to
Right.
Rocky Hill,
Right.
that will commute over here to Glastonbury, so they don't need to live in the towns that I've decided to put the business in.
Right.
Same thing with Waterbury. Love Waterbury. Don't have a business there, right? But I can pop them here, here, and here, like reasonable commute. I'm just from like a business
Yeah.
standpoint. It may not be like they've got to live in that town, but is it a reasonable commute?
Right.
Are they able to take surface roads from West Haven or Orange, not have to touch the Merritt or 95?
I really liked the Merit. It was great tonight.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's
a rarity.
We're really looking for, hey, if this is a driver to bring businesses in, get businesses to expand, to not leave, right? Like that's fuel, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and people who live upstairs are going to go downstairs to the bagel store. They're not going to go,
right.
Yeah. Right.
2 miles away. And so again, it's what the town's vision is for whether they want to create something new. And like I said, residential development more than pays its way tax-wise. Unless you're having to bring in a whole new sewer system and have to do a bond issue and all that. But like I said, with MRDA there now, that's a huge addition to the capacity of towns because they will cover the cost of some of that stuff, whether it's putting in a road or a septic system or some of the
I
other
attended
things.
the presentation with David Corus was there, so I can give you just 5 minutes on the three things that are necessary to really qualify in the MOU and stuff. So I can, if you want, I can update you on that.
And it's new, so, Woodbridge, again, it's totally up to the town, but you can get in on the ground floor there. The waiting time for
Yeah.
towns, proposing stuff is not long. So, that's what I got. And,
I have one more question for you. Is there a metric out there that says, if you have a certain mix of housing, your town is more successful and more sustainable versus if you have, let's say, only single-family
Yeah.
homes in a town, you're definitely going to deteriorate, kind of thing?
well, when I was at the partnership, we said, healthy communities need all kinds of people, and all kinds of people need all kinds of housing. And I think what we know, and I don't know how long you've lived here. My wife and I have been in West Hartford for since 1984. So what's that? Almost 40 years. Over the course of time, we all, when you think about it, live in a lot of different types of units because our circumstances change. So I shared a really crappy place in Albany with 4 friends after college, and then I, lived by myself for a while, and then I lived with my girlfriend, and I married her, and we, just moved different kinds of places. So yeah, you need that. I think you need it for the kind of churn that you don't have if you only have single-family homes, and then a few apartments, because then the baby boomers want to downsize, have no place to go. So you need another type of unit for those people. And then if you want to bring in workers, you need, and yeah, I think it's healthy. I think it allows for the real estate market to churn and people to move around in places to, you have enough of each kind of unit available on the market for rent or sale. Yeah, again, I don't know if there's a metric that tells you that. But
in our town, we have a messaging issue.
Mhm.
Because we're talking about housing, and a lot of the people misunderstand
Oh yeah.
the types of housing and what it may or may not do to the town. So we have to figure out how to provide the right message to encourage diversifying our housing.
Well, I'll
Is
tell you
there-
about that. I'll send you this video that shows that it's beautiful. It's not, people envision Father Panic Village with graffiti on the walls and used syringes on the ground and bullets flying through the air. It's not that, so you can show them that. We're also creating a video. We just did the interviews last week to show the people who live in income-restricted housing or affordable housing. So we did 8 interviews. 3 people were retired. The other 5 work. 4 work. 1 is a stay-at-home mom. They're old people, young people, black people, white people. They're all really great people, right? So they do imagine that the people who live in income-restricted units are the Crips and the Bloods, and they're going to steal their stuff and beat them up, and and that's not the case. But you're right. You have, and here's my thought about that. And we're doing town-wide meetings, where I'll go and stay till midnight to answer every question in the room. It's not irrational for people who write the biggest check of their life for their house, where everything is tied up in that house, their family security, their kids' education, their retirement. It's not irrational for them to worry about who's moving in down the block. I would, right? So I don't get down on the people who have concerns. They call them NIMBYists, not in my backyard. I think that's a little unfair because, like I said, I don't think it's crazy to worry about that. They may be wrong because they may be operating on, what they see on TV and stereotypes and all that, and they may think that these people are, drug dealers and gang leaders, and they may think that the places are going to look ugly and all. So, yeah, you do have to spend some time showing them that that's not the case, and that there are beautiful, and I'll send you some more pictures, mixed income developments all over the state in places like Avon and New Canaan and Darien that are great, and they work out fine, and the cops are not there every night. But yeah, it's every town. People worry about it, so you have to spend some time hearing their concerns. Because Scott, one thing I've learned over the years, and for those of us who took some behavioral psych in college, you find that a prime motivator for people is fear of loss. You're afraid of losing your friends and your family and the quality of life. And people live in this town because they love this town and they don't want anything to change. So as my son Ben taught me, he says, Dad, you have to tell these people that in order for your town to stay the same, it's going to have to change a little bit. Well, that's counterintuitive to people, right? But you can show them, if you can learn to put the housing where people agree it ought to go, where it's not going to mess up a neighborhood, and so they won't freak out about it, and show them what it's going to look like, and show them that the people who live there are the people who cut their hair and cut their lawns and empty grandpa's bedpan so he doesn't have to go in the nursing home and that sort of thing, then, but you got to take the time to do it, because people will not listen to other people until they feel they've been heard. That's why Ben is doing community conversations in most of the towns in the region, to let people come out and express their concerns. So there's a long answer to your question, but it's pretty typical. That happens in every town, and you have to take the time. Sorry, Scott.
No, I agree with you, Shadi. I think education is really important, but I also think that we sort of, the education has to be even more sophisticated at times as well. When I think of sort of, economic, it's sort of an economic has a disparate impact or a disparate treatment. They tend, people that, if we make the bar really high economically, we don't have any affordable options, we don't have middle housing, we don't have options to come in, we may think that, we're keeping our town exclusive, and that's just economic, and that's not, that's not the Crips Bloods kind of an argument.
Right.
But I think it's a sophisticated argument on the education too. I think we have to look at that, that there is things like disparate impact and disparate treatment that is embedded in that we just don't realize. I grew up in this town, and some of the things that I sort of took as true, I don't see as true anymore because it's an evolution of me. And I don't think I was a bad person when I took those as true, but I just think it was an educational evolution. And I realized that economic is kind of the same thing. I just didn't realize it, in other words, because it creates a disparate treatment or disparate impact. And that took time to have that sink in until I didn't, I wasn't busy raising families and doing everything, so I think you're right.
David?
Yeah. I'll send you some stuff.
Yes,
And
yeah.
I'll send you Mark Barnhart's contact information. He's a wonderful guy, and I would really.
His name comes up like every other meeting.
He does? Oh.
We need to create our own Barnhart.
Well, like I said,
We've all heard of him. We
need
now you gotta bring it.
Shotty's got to be our Mark Barnhart.
This,
For the
thank you
future.
so much.
sure.
Yeah.
And happy to come back or send you answers to any other questions. And I'll get you the AMI numbers, okay? So anyway, thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thank you. Happy holidays.
Thank you.
Thank you, you too. Merry Christmas,
All right.
and I hope the Yukon women win tonight.
Oh,
Right.
something to look forward to.
All right.
Okay, have a good evening.
Yeah.
Thank you, David. All right, so we'll move on our agenda here. POCD we really just covered. I just briefed Cliff real quickly on everything that we discussed. I'll take my own crack at it and come up with something to go forward to TPZ with. All right, so next on there, the former Country Club of Woodbridge. This is the technical assistance committee, not advisory assistance. If you sat in the meeting, it was very, very important. It is. We're assisting.
What is
Okay.
that? I'm sorry.
Technical Assistance Committee. So we've had, last week we had sort of the kickoff Zoom, and then on yesterday, it's hard to believe, we had the first real in-person meeting of this Technical Assistance Committee. And I know I talked to pretty much everybody in advance, like, issues and opportunities. That really was like sort of the homework coming in. I don't think we got too deep into that content. We covered it. They really kind of reviewed the project goals, objectives, and sort of what are the next 6 months going to look like for us, right? They did start with a history of the 15 different proposals that have come through for the property. And it was interesting going through that. There really was not background on what was the initial rationale for the country club acquisition. Why did we get into this mess, right, in the first place? So I think that there's still some general education that needs to happen there. But Cooper Robertson was in and really led the discussion. Then they went around the horn to the different boards and commissions and really asked about, hey, what work are you doing on the Country Club of Woodbridge, which was sort of a weird prompt because we've been told, like, don't think about the Country Club, right? Until this year, it was really the first time the EDC has been brought into that. So, I shared with them some of what we are working on today, and kind of our, work down in the business district right now, and kind of getting them up to speed on our EDC. Really, I also stressed our core mission, right, about diversifying the tax base, and that's the angle that we're, coming forth with here, right? And what's interesting is in that forum, everyone has their core mission, right? And the beauty of this is it all kind of comes together into sort of a
How well do we mesh?
well, I mean, I think that's really where the project is headed, right? I mean,
Okay.
it does not need to be one of the things that they discussed about why did we fail 15 times before was, first of all, we reacted to things as they came forward. Second of all, they were like, okay, we're going to do this development, take it or leave it. And we have the opportunity to, one, do what we want, and then also, hey, there can be green space and some housing and some commercial, and no developers coming forward with that, right? So that's sort of the, you know, the beauty of this. It was really interesting to listen to the different groups, you know, and it all kind of started with, you know, how we have this asset, right? So from an EDC perspective, how can we use this to diversify the tax base? You know, housing came forward with how can we utilize this asset to deliver upon the affordable housing goals, about our housing goals that we established 2 years ago. So it really was a good level setting for everybody. We did not get to walk the site because of the weather, so that will happen in January.
Which may have been a good day to walk it because of the rain. but
Well,
to
I
see
mean,
what it's like when it's in the rain. but
right, I
off,
thought,
it's-
you know, if we all put on like Amity football helmets because of the wind, like that was the issue, we could have
See what I can
walked
do.
it, but, so going forward, there is going to be, there are going to be these thematic focus groups, which is where we will get brought in, under the land use and development, which will include EDC and housing, right? Then there's a separate thematic focus group that will include like recreation, and a separate one that will include conservation. So that's where they will get more, we'll get invited to that, to be able to now react a little more to what Cooper Robertson brings forward, you know, and sort of like, here's this idea, what do you think from an EDC perspective? So I am banking that will happen in January, because they also, that happens in advance of the first real community unveiling for the project, which was slated to happen in January as well. So I think it's all gonna, once we hit the new year, it's gonna start to pick up
Okay.
speed, and it'll, you know, start to get really, really exciting. So it was a good meeting, you know, in terms of kicking everything off. Do you all have any questions or no? Okay. Then I had 2030 task force updates. So we had Chris here. You know, the updates from the last meeting. The engineering contract was signed by SLR, so that was sort of the big next step on the connectivity portion. Chris was just reminding me that they added a drainage study, which I think is very important down there. And then they're going to start their public information sessions, which I think is going to be critical, right? There's a year from now, there will be jackhammers and backhoes, and you need to prepare people for that.
Both the people there and the commuters.
And the community.
And the commuters,
Everybody.
yeah,
Everybody,
absolutely,
absolutely.
everybody.
It's gonna be a big deal.
So, in addition to that, you know, then there's really the placemaking side of this, right? And the infill and a lot of that work, which had been kind of put to the wayside. We talked last time about Connecticut Main Street Center. Rick, you weren't here, but they're a group that really looks at creating, you know, revitalizing main streets and downtowns across Connecticut, and so bringing them in as part of that project. So we will begin meeting with them in January. We signed our agreement. It's $700 a year, right, to work with them. I think it's a pretty good deal.
Wow.
And we'll start to make progress there. We did have our business retention kickoff meeting. So Cliff, Sherry, and myself met with Dale to really think about, and Rick will be part
I'll be joining you.
in the future. But really, kind of how do we start to engage the businesses that we do have? And, you know, we have a number of businesses down there. I think it's a lot of discovery. But I also think this allows us to start to develop the discipline and the regimen as our business community grows, that we have something in place so we know when we're interacting with them, you know, here's what a site visit looks like. These are the key questions that we need to ask. So there's more to come there. Follow-up meeting in January. You know, really the starting point is we still need to really get a handle on who's here,
Yeah.
right? And how do we get to the different sectors so that we can start to classify, like, all right, how many healthcare businesses do we have, and how much is in retail. So more on that. The project pop-up that Sherry was gonna share the update tonight. So we had a call. Mika joined us right before Thanksgiving. So if you remember, we were looking to fund that initiative with our remaining ARP funds, and those have been shifted somewhere else that had to be contracted by the end of the year. So it's not the end of the project. It will be budgeted for the next fiscal year, and we're really looking at bringing this into the fold more in the back half of 2025.
Okay.
And trying to tie it to, the two biggest seasons are back to school and holiday, right? So trying to maybe do something around back to school with that mobile unit, and a variety of different options on where it could be. Initially we were thinking about, well, the business district would make sense. We could, we talked about Bradley Road and near Saloon, but then it kind of turned to, why wouldn't we do this up the hill? We're redeveloping the firehouse into the community center, right? Which is a big project that's going on. So can we tie into that around back to school, instead of making it just down in the flats? Have maybe dual, like something in the the center of town as well as in the flats. So that will really, I would say in March, we're going to start to kind of bring things together and sign a contract and get out and start to look at the different brands that will be a part of that. And then other updates. Didn't really have too much there. Is anyone wants to?
I can give you in 3 minutes. I can give you just what I took away from MRTA.
Okay.
If you want, with David Course.
Sure.
So real quick, I attended SCROG, and well attended. Guilford, by the way, turned out 12 people. But so MRTA, it's a bad name. They're thinking of another name for it, but it's a Municipal Redevelopment Agency, MRTA. And it was, so they found out that there was a development agency called Capital Development Agency or whatever out of Hartford as a quasi-public redevelopment agency to assist in the redevelopment of Hartford. It turned out to be very successful. So the governor, I guess, said, oh, great, about 2019 before the pandemic, let's do it. Everybody, so all the municipalities, let's spread the wealth and let's get it. So they funded it with $60 million. They didn't start up after the pandemic. This guy named David Koresh, really smart and good and all this stuff, is starting to put it together. And so it's a work in process. So that's when David said get early. But here's what it does essentially, is that there's money available from the state. And so you have to sort of come up with a center point for where you want to develop. And to get into that, you have to opt in to be part of and essentially sign on to be part of the process of working with MRTA if you want to. I make no opinion about it, but here's how it works. So you have to have a resolution by the Board of Selectmen to do it, and there has to be a public hearing to actually opt in, to join in to MRTA. Once you do that, you make that decision, you come up with an area where you think you want to build housing. And because this is for any kind of housing, not just affordable housing, not affordable housing, it's just housing. And so if you want to build housing, you have to find a target area, take up, it's about 500 acres, a square mile is 640 acres, so it's a circle. So you take a half a mile and you just circle it, and you say, okay, I want to build, and you got to do 3 things for them to certify you as being able to join into this and get a chance for the pot of gold. And that you have to do 3 things. You have to truncate your review and cap the amount of hearings that you have for creating substantial increases in housing. It's nebulous on what substantial is, but we can get into the details, but you have to create substantial increase in housing units. You have to truncate the review. Here's a big one. You have to have middle housing by right, and you have to have concurrent review. I can't remember what that was. But the long and short of it is those 3 things compels them to certify you. So if you give middle housing, that's your 2s, your 4s, the kind of stuff we don't have. I mean, the 4s and, the kind of the middle range of housing that we lack. If you have that by right, you don't have to get a special exception and go through all those barriers. If you get it by right, you truncate the review and not have a lot of hearings, then they automatically have to accept you. So then that entitles you to play a game and go get a memorandum of understanding with MRTA. And then you can go get anything you want. But so it could be planning assistance, it could be bringing up a sewer, it could be, everything, and then you have to do a cost sharing. So there has to be some skin in the game from the town. So for instance, if you were saying, hey, I need planning help, or I actually need you to bring the sewer up for me, you have to have some skin in the game. Either you pay some of the costs, or you have to figure out a way for revenue sharing. So for instance, on the big stuff around the state, you could even picture somebody saying, hey, look, I'll give MRTA the property, because I get the improvement, right? And where we make the money is we make it on the taxes on the improvement. We don't make it on the lease or the sale of the property, right? You're not going to make any money selling the country club. You're not going to make any money selling that. You're going to make the money on what gets built on it. If you want to make money. If you don't want to make money, fine, go somewhere else. But so you don't make money. So you have to have some revenue cost sharing. So they could even envision the state getting a ground lease, and then they'll take the ground lease flow to get some of their money because they're going to front you to bring up the sewers to make a property be developed. So they do project funding, demolition, all sorts of things that they could do for you, depending upon how that process goes. So once you apply and once you get accepted and you meet those criteria on wanting to increase housing significantly, substantially, then you start negotiating a memorandum of understanding and start thinking about what you need from the state and what you want to build. And that's a process that then everybody goes a different way, and based upon your town, and the state's here to help the towns that want to create that project area. So that's MRTA.
Thank you.
How do you spell that? It's M-U-R-D-A?
MRDA.
Or M-R-D, thank you.
Municipal redevelopment. I think it's municipal.
MRDA, yeah, Municipal Redevelopment Authority.
Authority.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
yeah. So I mean, I don't know that it's for us because you gotta, get some, you gotta commit to substantial. Yeah. But anyway, it's out there as a resource.
So then open it up for public comment. Okay. We never get any public comment.
Give it next year.
Next year. You're probably right.
Maybe that's a good thing.
I give it 6
Maybe we're
months,
not
right? But when is this project done? 6 months?
6 months.
All right, so the next meeting, January 9th, we will be joined by Rex Development. So Dale's group will be here. They'll be sharing the state of the Connecticut economy. They're starting to build their annual regional economic development, CDOS. I forget the acronym, what the name is. So that's sort of the starting point for that. They're going to want us to bring in some of our issues, opportunities. I'll review her email just so that we're prepared to share out a little bit of what we're working on. I think our POCD conversation gives us a good starting point on that. And we'll also, second half of that meeting, we're probably going to need to share 2025 goals. So I did get a request from the finance group on that. So I'm gonna really kind of take the POCD and port that into their format. Yeah. They're going to be looking for budget on certain things too. So I think we do.
Okay.
We have about $50 or so to pick up a bar tab or whatever. So we'll pull all that together, and I think that's it.
Okay. Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second. All in favor? All right.